Hello everyone and welcome to this presentation. My name is Kristoffer and I would like to present our paper called Ecosystem-Driven Business Opportunity Identification Method and Web-Based Tool with a case study of the electric vehicle home charging energy ecosystem in Denmark. So the agenda for this presentation, I will go through a short introduction on the topic and go through the method that we propose, the software architecture for our web-based tool, and applying the proposed method on a case study. I'll give you a short discussion on the method and conclude in the end. So when companies they want to introduce or implement new solutions into the market, especially the energy market, then to do that successfully, they need to understand the local needs and the challenges, and also they need to know the future ecosystem and the transitions between in order to identify and capture these business opportunities. But many companies, they are lacking this ecosystem thinking. They are more focused on the main value chain, so it's difficult for them to actually investigate the complex system from a business perspective, which needs an ecosystem thinking. So there's no real systematic approach for investigating unmet needs and megatrends in ecosystems. Existing theories actually addresses the adoption of innovation and technology, but they do not do it from an ecosystem perspective. And also theories actually address this strategy management that intend to investigate the impact factors in business and strategies. But that's also lacking this ecosystem thinking. They're only thinking like personal or within inside the organization. Therefore, our paper proposes a method for identifying business opportunities based on business ecosystem modeling and architecture design, and also the 5 business ecosystem dimensions called CSTEP. So the method touches upon the domains of the business ecosystem theory, business ecosystem dimensions, and technology adoption and theories and models. So for the business ecosystem theories, the literature actually discusses many different, but common for them all is that they are lacking this systematic approach. Therefore, we have in earlier work published a framework for ecosystem modeling, and we have applied it to the same case study that I will go through later in this presentation. Therefore, we will not go more into details with the actual ecosystem, as this is already proposed in earlier work. We will focus more on analyzing the different factors within the ecosystem. And for the ecosystem dimensions, the literature is not focusing on all needed dimensions. For example, it's from all the identified the dimensions in the literature, we found that, for example, the climate dimension is missing, and especially in energy business ecosystem, it's very important because the transition to a green energy system is first of all due to climate change. So that's a really important dimension to include. But again, in earlier work, we propose this C-step business dimensions, which is used in this method presented in this paper. So just to give a short recap on the C-step dimensions, you can see we had the climate, environment, geographic situation for the C, and for the S is the societal, culture, demographic, environment, and T is the technology readiness, E is economy and finance, and P is policies and regulations. And we can go into more details, but you can read our earlier work on that part. And also the C-STEP dimension also considers the macro and the micro levels of the individual dimension. The methodology is shown in the figure here, where we have the two boxes in the top is the earlier work for the ecosystem design and modeling, and the other one is the introduction of the actual C-STEP dimensions. So these are applied within this methodology. And this methodology consists of 4 main steps, and you can see in the box they have several sub-steps, but I will only go through the main steps. So in step 1 we identify the C-STEP dimensions of the business ecosystem and thereby identify the current system. And for step 2 we identify the potential changes in the business ecosystem that can help us portray this future ecosystem. And for step 3 we try to come up with the timeline stage transitions for the future ecosystem. And in step 4 we identify the potential changes and thereby identify value propositions. So I will go through each step with you shortly. I will also go through where we apply them, so I will just go quickly over them. Where here you can see in the first one we choose the value chain segment in the business ecosystem, the related actors and objects, and we try to identify the different on macro and micro level that identify the current condition of the system. And in step 2, which we consider all the future goals, regulations, so for example climate goals, and by that we can try to see a trend that is going to happen. And from that trend we can try to come up with how the future ecosystem will look like. And in this process we also identify potential solutions, which we do from the literature by a state-of-the-art analysis. So to identify the timeline of the future ecosystem, we need to have some criteria which we can score the different conditions of the ecosystem, and by that we can give them a ranking and see how the timeline will go. And yeah, you can see here this is a table where we actually give them the scores and sum up, and then we can see the timeline. But again, I will go through that when we apply the method. And then in the end we have the transition stages, and we know how the future ecosystem will be, and we can identify these different value propositions which leads to these business opportunities. We have developed a software tool called the Opportunity Identifier, which is a web-based tool that is much more user-friendly to apply this method more easily. Yeah, and just to go quickly upon the structure or the architecture, we have these front end, back end, and then the database, where the communication from the front end to the back end is established through a tool called Affiliations, which is an HTTP client for JavaScript, providing the ability to make HTTP requests from the application running in the user's browser. And I will not get further into details for the software architecture. And yeah, the case study is for electric vehicle home charging energy ecosystem, which you probably have guessed from the title. Here I will go directly into, we already have, as mentioned, the ecosystem. So we have identified these different actors and their roles, like the charging bus supplier, the role as a service supplier. We have the distribution system operator, and we have an EV user. And continuing with them, as an example, we can provide them into or put them into the different related C-STEP dimensions. and we can identify the current state. And for example, for societal culture, we can see, okay, currently we have 2.4% of electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, etc. of the total Danish car population. So that's the current ecosystem. So to go to step 2, I want to identify the future. We need to identify or find what are the current goals that could lead to these mega trends, etc. So here we identify, for example, the Danish climate goals, and we have some sustainable and smart mobility strategy. So taking these into considerations, we can see what a future ecosystem would look like, or at least give a good guess. And we can see that we will have an increase in the number of electric vehicles. So from literature we identify that what problems could occur from this. The DSO would find it difficult to or would most likely experience grid overload with too many EVs. So what we find is that intelligent charging algorithms can help out with this. And then based on the scoring criteria before, we can actually score the different conditions, and we can get this timeline of the transition stages. Yeah, so the first thing that will occur is that we'll have this increasing number of electric vehicles, and EV users will adopt this hourly electricity price scheme in Denmark. Yeah, and from this we can identify these different value propositions, which I will get more into the conclusion. So for discussion, yeah, the method is a bit complex, especially also because there's a lot of work behind identifying the different solutions and the problems occurring from the conditions of the future system. So to do this easier and all these different steps, we have one web-based platform where several users can contribute concurrently. So each can investigate each part and then work together in the same tool. And here's some screenshots where I can see some of the interface. So to conclude, our paper proposed an ecosystem-driven business opportunity identification method, and from applying it to the case study, we identified 3 solutions. First of all, an intelligent decentralized electric vehicle charging algorithm that considers the price signals, distribution tariffs, and CO2 emission signals, and also intelligent centralized electric vehicle charging algorithm, first used from system operators to avoid grid overloads, and next the centralized strategies will be used for market aggregators to participate in other markets like the ancillary service market, and provide more flexibility to the grid with vehicle to grid services. Our method addresses gaps in the literature, and it contributes to 3 research domains: the business ecosystem, technology adoption, and strategy management. Furthermore, we propose this or present this user-friendly web-based tool that can be used to easily apply the method. Thank you.